So before we get started, I would highly recommend to grab a snack and maybe even something to drink and sit back and relax and try not to have your brain melted by all of this convoluted information that I'm about to talk about. There is a lot of stuff here, so I am preparing you now in advance. I wish you the best of luck throughout this video. Today we're going to be talking about Attack on Titan's timeline, more specifically the fixed timeline, the bootstrap paradox, the predestination paradox, also known as the causal loop. This is a theory that has come to fruition after the most recent video that I done talking about the chapter, after what that chapter gave to us, after reading your comments, because there was a lot of incredible comments throughout that video kind of expressing a lot of different opinions, after reevaluating the multiple timeline theory and doing a ton of research myself, I've come to a specific point where I think that the multiple timeline theory, as much as it could be possible and it could probably work, doesn't necessarily fit Attack on story right now. And for me, it's taking a back seat. I know a lot of people don't like hearing the time travel method within Attack on Titan or think it's unnecessary, which is perfectly fine. But just know that a lot of this stuff has a lot of correlation and connection with the overall story of Attack on Titan. And most importantly, the theme of it, which is freedom, fighting to every extent to gain some sort of freedom. I'm going to break this video up into different segments, so it's a lot more easier to digest and try and keep it in coherent order so it's not all over the place. So hopefully it's a little bit more easier to digest in the long run. With that being said, let's get started. First and foremost, I want to talk about the recent chapter and talk about some specific things within it. There is a lot of information that is given within the most recent chapter that has changed the story quite a bit, especially surrounding the Attack Titan, Eren quote-unquote manipulating Grisha's memories and everything in between. There is a lot of stuff here to go through and to point out specifically, but I think it actually wraps up rather well in a specific manner. First and foremost, I want to talk about the Attack Titan's ability that was revealed. Supposedly, the Attack Titan has the power to see into the future. It's a pretty crazy thing when you think about it. After reading your comments and doing a ton of research myself, I'm actually on this situation where the Attack Titan having that ability is not entirely true, or at least it's not to the full extent that the chapter kind of ambiguously gives off. What I mean by this is that it seems like the chapter makes it out that Eren was manipulating Grisha for a specific result. I don't necessarily think this is the case, and there's a couple of reasons for it. The big reason why I don't think the Attack Titan has the ability that it says it does is because it's very OP. It is very powerful, but there's no place within the story with the Attack Titans that we know, both Kruger and Grisha, ever being able to use this ability to any extent. So why is it only possible as of now? Why is Eren the only one utilizing it to such an extent? I think what the actual ability is to being able to show people the memories of the future, kind of like what Eren has been doing by going into the past and showing people the future, but that's it. I don't think the Attack Titan has the ability to be able to go back in time on its own accord, which would be a very big thing. If Grisha or even Kruger could already see into the future just by using the ability, it would change a lot of different outcomes, and they could avoid a lot of different things, but they haven't. Instead, we're kind of tailored around Eren's perspective, and the only reason he was able to access Grisha's memories is because of Zeke, and Zeke taking him into his memories, which then in turn goes into Grisha's memories, and that was the way that Eren was able to access Grisha's memories to show him the future. When you think about it like that, and the only reason that this is possible is because of the Founding Titan and what Zeke had done, what's the point of revealing that the Attack Titan has a specific ability to see into the future? I think that Grisha sees it like that, or has misinterpreted it because he's gaining information and visuals from the future that he shouldn't be. But this is obviously because of Eren, and Eren showing him these things. So if Zeke has taken Eren into Grisha's memories, and that was the biggest thing that was needed, hence why Eren actually thanked Zeke for it, which allowed him to pursue this path specifically, which is the words from Eren himself, there was no other way that Eren could do it. It's not like Eren could just go back in time whenever he wanted, or go back into the past memories and manipulate people to any extent. What you can take from this, however, with Grisha's reaction of a future that is terrifying to all extent and crying out to Zeke to stop Eren, is that this has already happened, or it's currently happening, which connects almost perfectly with a fixed timeline, or the bootstrap paradox. Before I get into the big actual time traveling theories, think about the story right now on a singular timeline, and it is well and truly fixated, meaning that the past, the present, and the future has already taken place, or it's taken taking place at the exact same time as one another. And somewhere within this fixed timeline, there is a loop that keeps somewhat in terms resetting it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a literal reset, where by the end of the story, Eren wakes up again and that's him under the tree. It doesn't have to be as literal as a full factory reset. The abilities and the situations can loop over continuously. And there's a lot of abilities and situations in here that can loop, which causes this ripple effect. To get out of this loop, something has to change. There's no real outcome for it, but this is where I think Isayama is kind of leading it up to, so he can write it in a way where freedom comes at a very massive cost. Even though technically everything's on a fixed timeline and Eren knows the results, there is a lot of anomalies within the story, such as Ymir and the paths and the place that she resides in, which are not restricted by time, which throw in a little bit of a wrench into the whole story, but we'll get onto that. So the general consensus of this part, and just to run it by everyone pretty simply, I don't think the Attack Titan has the ability to see into the future, let alone manipulate it. Manipulating it implies that Eren can change it in any way, shape, or form he wants, so he can avoid a future and start a better one, which would in turn mean that there are different timelines. That's not what's going on. Grisha has misinterpreted the power, quote unquote, of the Attack Titan because he's seeing the future that Eren is showing him already, a future that has already happened or is currently happening, depending on how you view the timeline, and depending how Isayama wants to write it. The only reason that this is possible is because Zeke has allowed Eren to go into Grisha's memory at this point in time within the story, which has already happened within the loop. If everything is taking place at the same time on a fixed timeline, the period where Eren kisses Historia's hand and is able to access his father's memories to in turn see future Eren's memories with what future Eren showed Grisha, which allowed the younger Eren to see those memories, so it would lead to this specific result. Everything has kind of cohesively connected to one another because of Zeke and the Founding Titan ability, not the Attack Titan's ability. We know that the paths connect all of the Titan shifters together, and those quote-unquote world lines is what I'm going to call them, very similar to Steins Gate to an extent. It's not restricted by time at all, and they connect all the Titan shifters from past, present, and future, funny enough, at the exact same time. And Ymir is the core of it, who holds a tremendous amount of power. With this said, let's move on to the actual time traveling theories and the methods to get a better idea on how this all works. So we're going to be talking about three different things: the bootstrap paradox, the predestination paradox, and the causal loop. They're pretty much the same thing, there's just different names for them, and some of them have specific things that are a little bit different, but we're going to go through a couple of them, and considering that they merge together pretty seamlessly. First and foremost is the bootstrap paradox. It is a theoretical paradox of time travel that happens when an object or piece of information sent back in time becomes trapped within an infinite cause-effect loop, in which the item no longer has a discernible point of origin and is said to be uncaused or quote-unquote self-created. Within the bootstrap paradox, there is three different things that relate to sending information and time travel in general. The first one is information. An example of the bootstrap paradox involving information would be if a time traveler went back in time and taught Einstein the theory of relativity. Before returning to his own time, Einstein claims it's his own work, and over the following decades, the theory is published countless times until a copy of it eventually ends up in the hands of the original time traveler, who then takes it back to Einstein, begging the question, where did the theory originate? We cannot say that it came from the time traveler, as he learned it from Einstein, but we also cannot say that it is from Einstein, since he was taught by the time traveler, so who then discovered the theory of relativity? Another example is an object being used. A movie, Somewhere in Time, 1980, provides an example of the bootstrap paradox involving an object, in this case a pocket watch. In 1972, Christopher Reeve is given a watch by an older woman, which in turns out was given to her younger self by Reeve after traveling back to 1912. The young woman then completes the infinite loop by giving the watch to Reeve in 1972 when she's older. An inconsistency that subsequently arises is how the pocket watch would survive countless time cycles while remaining unaged and unaffected by time. The problem is no less true for information trapped inside a bootstrap paradox. Both seem to violate the second law of thermodynamics, which states that entropy, gradual decline into disorder, will always increase over time. Last but not least, there is a person. The most extreme example of the bootstrap paradox involving a person can be found in Robert A. Heinlein's short story All You Zombies, which inspired the 2014 movie Predestination. Here, the main character, an intersex male born a female, is tricked into going back in time and impregnating his pre-gender reassigned female self. who subsequently gives birth to himself or herself. As a result, he becomes a self-created entity who is both his own mother and father. This naturally prevents a real mind-bending chicken and egg conundrum. Once again, however, the story appears to be self-consistent, with no changes taking place each time throughout the loop. Nevertheless, Heinlein doesn't attempt to answer the role free will plays in this imaginative scenario. So there was a lot of information in there, right? And that is the general consensus of the bootstrap paradox, and I'm going to explain how this applies to Attack on Titan in a second. But first and foremost, I kind of just want to recap it simply. The predestination paradox and the bootstrap paradox, on the other hand, are examples of closed loops in time which cause and effect repeat in a circular pattern, resulting in a self-created entity with no point of origin. Despite being an oddity, this self-created event, like the Big Bang, does not appear to be an impossibility, nor does it imply any inconsistency with the timeline's history. In fact, all the events in the time loop are fixed and take place on a singular, unchangeable timeline. So that is the bootstrap paradox and the predestination paradox kind of in a nutshell. I do want to mention this, however, which is going to give you more context for what I'm about to talk about. Predestination in theology is the doctrine that all events have been willed by God, usually with reference to the eventual fate of the individual soul. Explanations and predestination often seek to address the paradox of free will, whereby God's omniscience seems incompatible with human free will. Last but not least, to kind of top it all off and give all the information, I'm sure your brain's kind of melting right now, is the causal loop. A causal loop in the context of time travel, or the causal structure of space-time, is a sequence of events, actions, information, objects, people, in which an event is among the causes of another event, which in turn is among the causes of the first mentioned event. Such causally looped events then exist in space-time, but their origin cannot be determined. What does all of this mean? Funny enough, we can connect absolutely everything that I just talked about to the entirety of Attack on Titan's story and its timeline being fixed, having a specific loop in there, and how this all correlates back to Ymir specifically. The first thing that I want to mention is the murals. If I find a picture of them, I'll put them on screen, obviously. I've seen these floating around on Twitter for quite a bit. I can't remember what the manga equivalents look like, but the anime ones are also a very good reference because they give color. These murals show us a couple of different things. First and foremost, Ymir and an object within her hand making a deal with the quote-unquote Earth Devil. Funny enough, however, there is two murals, one with a blonde-headed quote-unquote Earth Devil and another quote-unquote Earth Devil which has black hair. Who would those two characters be? And why would Ymir be making a deal with them? I've seen this a lot on Twitter, and to put simply, I think both of these quote-unquote Earth Devils are both Zeke and Eren Yeager. You're probably thinking, how on earth would Ymir make a deal with Eren and Zeke? Funny enough, everything that I just talked about correlates to this situation in itself, and how the possibility of Ymir potentially creating the Titan abilities and being gifted the Titan abilities from the Earth Devil is the cause of effect of what has happened in the future. What does that mean on simple terms? Considering the coordinates and Ymir herself control everything and how this is all connected from past, present to future, there is a point where the origin of Titans have to be explained. Like, who exactly are these Earth Devils? What came first? How did these Earth Devils come to existence? To think that Eren and Zeke are Earth Devils actually makes a lot of sense, especially from Ymir's perspective. If Eren and Zeke travel back to when Ymir was born and gave her all the knowledge that she has now and even the ability that she has now. Remember, the Ymir and the Founding Titans specifically have the abilities to change a lot of different things. They can create Titans from scratch. They can euthanize an entire race and bloodline. There's a lot of things that they can do. Taking all of this knowledge that they have now, both Zeke and Eren, going all the way back to Ymir before she had any of this, to make her a deal, to give her this ability, to give her this power. By giving her this power and the information that she has, she's connected to the past, present, and future. However, because of this though, she is a slave to royal blood. You're probably still not convinced. So Ymir never created the Titans, but Eren and Zeke did in the future? Yes. What I talked about before was an object being created by time looping. This example is exactly the same as the Einstein theory of relativity that I talked about. If you in the present took Einstein's theory of relativity into the past to Einstein and gave it to him, and then he published it, and then you would see it in the future, and then you took it back to him again and again and again because it's always destined to happen, where did the formula come from? Einstein didn't create the formula, and neither did you. You just seen it and took it back to Einstein. So where does it come from? You can apply this exact situation, because this is considered under the classification of information within the bootstrap paradox, with Ymir specifically. Eren and Zeke can take all of this information back to Ymir and tell her absolutely everything, which in turns, their actions cause the Titans to be created and the past to be specifically created as well, which means that their timeline is fixed and they're always doomed to repeat this every single time. However, I think the hitch comes in place that there is two possible outcomes on who Ymir actually chooses. That is the kind of end tail of this and how this loop could potentially be broken and continue on its fixed timeline. I'm not saying there's two different timelines, but I am saying that there could be at least another option that comes out of it because of the quote-unquote two different deals that she made with either Zeke or Eren, which in terms, the Titans and all of their abilities, and Ymir specifically, and all the information that she knows is created through the essence of time travel. There is no origin point for it. It is completely self-created. It is created within the looping method of taking information from the future to take it all the way back into the past, so it happens. And within that is the outcome. It also works with Isayama in sense that he doesn't actually have to explain the origin of Titans. Where did they come from? And he also doesn't have to explain the origin of the quote-unquote Earth Devils. This is a very standard thing that a lot of authors do when it comes to abilities or monsters or different races or specific beings. You don't necessarily have to give them a starting point, and this is a perfect way around it. If the starting point is created within the loop and it is self-created, then it works extremely well within the story and there's not really many plot holes to be found. So what does this mean? Eren and Zeke give all this information to this Ymir right now, and that is the reason why she was able to create Titans in the past? In simple terms, yes. They can give her everything. The information, they can give her the object, which could be of any sort of correlation. The baseball that Zeke gave Eren, which I've seen a lot of people talking about, could also be a very good one. And the person is obviously the Earth Devils, which are Zeke and Eren. So that's all three ticked off for the bootstrap paradox to actually work. So on top of all of this, how do you break it? What is Ymir? What are the paths specifically? And how were they created? And what are they used for? I think the path that connect all the Titan shifters from past, present, and future, and with Ymir being a being that kind of sits around it all, kind of goes to show that this is taking place on a singular timeline, especially with everything that I've talked about. Everything has already been predestined to happen. In a sense, however, you can also look at Ymir as being a god. Now, you would think, where does this god come from? But you can actually correlate it back to what I just talked about with Zeke and Eren kind of creating Ymir to begin with. She is self-created by the time loop itself, by Zeke and Eren giving all of these abilities and these powers in the first place, which is something that is always doomed to happen on a loop, on a repeat, which goes back to the predestination thing that I talked about, that all events have been willed by God, usually with a reference to the eventual fate of the individual soul. Explanations of predestination often seek to address the paradox of free will, whereby God's omniscience seems incompatible with human free will. This goes directly with the story of Attack on Titan. The story is all about freedom and doing everything to get to that point of freedom. If Ymir is higher than all of this, she's somewhat incompatible with Zeke and Eren's ideology and their will to do these different things. On top of that, she's also a slave to royal blood. Considering this goes perfectly with Attack on Titan's theme, considering this is so difficult to achieve because there's so many different intricate parts that revolve around each other, that revolve around Ymir, and so many steps and things that Eren has to do to potentially diverge it just a little bit so they can get back to the original timeline that was always meant to happen. But Ymir seemingly is the loop that is constantly continuing. So how do we break it? With all of this information, with the context that is given, how does this all come to a conclusion? There's one thing that is mentioned with information and objects in the bootstrap paradox, is that within the time travel itself and within the looping, it starts to disintegrate over time. Now, this can be used pretty intricately with the story. Somewhere within the loop, the information and the object allowing all of this, which would be the powers and the information that Ymir has, would slowly trickle away over time and would disappear, which would thus break the loop and continue back on your original set timeline. That would be the first way to go about it. that's how we break out of this whole situation and continue to the end of the story. There's obviously a lot of things that have to take place before that, like Eren activating the rumbling and how that affects absolutely everything. However, how do we actually achieve that? How do we get to that point? Considering Ymir and this place specifically is completely above time, there is a lot of anomalies within it. We don't necessarily know how this affects this fixed timeline in total and the loop. If Eren were to replace Ymir in some sense, or do something that is a little bit different within the loop because it's starting to fade away and lose its effect because of the looping aging, we're going back to an original timeline where everything is well and truly possible. It won't be a massive change, it won't be a jarring difference, but obviously Eren doesn't know every single result. If Eren can't stop Ymir, maybe he has to become Ymir to an extent, or he has to replace her to kind of uphold this place that we're in that keeps this timeline in check, but the end result is obviously a lot different. The looping kind of still continues, but the fixed timeline is still well and truly good. That in itself is massively theoretical, but it could be a possibility. Without a doubt, there is a lot of information within this video. I want to apologize for the length of it and how convoluted and confusing it is, but a lot of this stuff starts to make a lot of sense when you truly think about it and sit down and dive into all of the information that there is. I'm not saying that this idea is what is 100% going to happen, but I definitely do think it's something very interesting to think about, and I really would love to hear what all of you think. What I love to see is everyone, like my video for AOT's chapter, I love seeing people talk and express their opinions and their theories on how this works. So I 100% am going to see a lot of people kind of filling in the blanks for me, or maybe switching some things around that make a lot more sense. But I think a lot of people really wanted me to talk about the general consensus of a fixed timeline. Do agree that the multiple timeline is way too convoluted. Even though everything I talked about seems very messy, it actually makes a lot of detailed sense and could easily be written to fit with Attack on Titan's ending, and works really well with the theme of the story in fighting so difficultly and going against all odds to achieve freedom and free will, and that Eren was born into this world, and the information that he has is so important to how this all continuously goes forward. However, within Ymir's place, something that is above time, the anomaly starts to set in, and we don't know what these powers can specifically do in total. I'm very excited to see the amount of incredible detailed analysis and theories that people come up with. They're always really amazing to read, which I appreciate heavily. Obviously, there was a lot of difficult things within this video. I'm going to try and break it up and put timestamps in case you want to go back and listen to segments instead of just the whole thing, which would be nice and easy. The origin of Ymir and the origin of Titans is a bit of a stretch, but works really well with the bootstrap paradox, as well as how the story fits into with the whole casual time loop and fixed timeline thing, especially with Ymir in the past. There's just so many different things. Regardless if this theory is true or not, I'm not necessarily sure, but it definitely was a very great experience to create this video and put a lot of research into it, and hopefully the end result in terms of editing and whatnot will be really good. With that being said, that is basically it. Thank you all for watching. I truly appreciate all of you. I apologize for this being so goddamn long and messy. I hope your brain is a-okay. I really do. Let me know your thoughts down below. I know I'm going to see a bunch of incredible comments without a doubt, which is always amazing to read. But I'm actually going to end the video off here. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.